So in thinking about what I wanted to speak about tonight, I realize that many of us may still be slowly recovering from our tryptophan comas, from the turkey, or in my case, the pot roast, from all the delicious pies that were made. I heard about some of them this evening, from the wonderful gathering of family and friends. And we're here this evening, I would hope, I would envision, I would imagine, as a chance just to continue to be together, to hold on to the essence of Thanksgiving that is blended now into the essence of Shabbat. So in tonight's words, rather than give a sermon as promised earlier, not to worry, I'll give one very soon, thought I'd share a little story with you. A little story entitled, "It's Not My Problem." Once there was a kingdom everyone called paradise. It was called paradise not because it was any more beautiful or any richer than any other place, but because of the way the people who lived there cared for one another. In this kingdom, if a friend needed something from a friend, someone always stepped forward to help without even being asked. If a neighbor needed something from a neighbor, someone would respond cheerfully and graciously without ever asking for anything in return. If a stranger needed something, people came forward to help with hospitality, generosity, and kindness. All this was because of a wise king. The king knew that his subjects would treat one another the way he treated them. So he was always careful and attentive and helpful. If he couldn't help someone, he would at least listen and express his concern. At last the king grew old, and he appointed his son, the prince, to rule in his place when the time came. Soon the king died, and the prince assumed the throne. But the prince was not wise like his father, nor kind, and he did not treat people the way his father did. The royal ministers approached the prince and declared, "Your Majesty, we have a terrible problem. There is a famine in a certain corner of the land, and the people there are starving. We must do something." "They are starving?" said the prince impatiently. "Yes, starving. They have no food to feed their children." "But I have plenty of food," responded the prince, biting into a big apple from the bowl of fruit before him. "If they are starving, I'm sorry, but it's not my problem." "Perhaps Your Majesty didn't understand. People are suffering and they haven't any food. They'll die if we do nothing." "Well, I'm sorry, but it's just not my problem." The ministers shook their heads in disbelief and slowly walked away. Just then, another group of royal messengers approached the throne. "Your Majesty, we have a terrible situation. A river has become poisoned, and the people who live along its banks have no water to drink. We must help them." "No water?" asked the prince, even more impatiently as he poured himself a large glass of water. "Yes, Your Majesty, there is no water. People are dying of thirst." "But I have plenty of water," responded the prince, holding up his glass. "I'm sorry, but it's just not my problem." No one in the royal court seemed able to do more to move the prince. Every problem was presented to him, met with the same bothered look and the same response. "I'm sorry, but that's not my problem." Before long, everyone in the kingdom was acting like the prince. When a friend needed help from a friend or a neighbor needed a hand from a neighbor, the one who was beseeched would look bothered and respond, "You need help? Well, I'm sorry, but it's not my problem." And since they refused to help one another, they certainly refused to help strangers. Soon the kingdom had changed completely. It was no longer paradise. It was a wilderness, a wasteland. Soon no one remembered the way things had been. No one remembered the paradise that the kingdom once was. No one but fishermen. Fishermen remembered the old king and the way things used to be. It hurt him that everyone had become as selfish as the young prince. If only he could remind the people and teach them. But what was one old fisherman to do? Then one day he thought of a solution. He gathered all his money and bought tools and paint and materials. He set to work fixing up his old fishing boat. He would turn it into a yacht, the most beautiful yacht in the harbor. Fishermen worked hard. Each day people came by and admired his boat. "Hey, fisherman," they'd say, "when you're done, will you take us for a ride on your yacht?" "Sure," he said, "everyone will be invited." It took him a year to finish his work. When the yacht was ready, fishermen made a huge sign and posted it for all to see. He invited everyone to come for a ride on the lake to celebrate the yacht's first voyage. Everyone came that Sunday morning, even the prince. It was a splendid, clear day. The sun shone warmly and the lake was calm. Fishermen guided the yacht out onto the lake. When he reached the middle, far from the shore, he dropped anchor and invited everyone to enjoy themselves. His guests brought out their picnic baskets and fishing poles, and everyone had a wonderful day on the lake. Late in the afternoon, the wind picked up and waves rocked the boat. "Fishermen, can we head home now?" the guests asked. "Sure," said fisherman. "There's just one thing I need to do." He opened his toolbox and brought out a large hand drill. He walked to the exact center of the boat, positioned the drill on the hull, and began to drill. Say, fisherman," people asked, "what are you doing?" "I'm drilling a hole." "But why are you drilling a hole?" "Why? Because it's a nice day for drilling holes," he responded nonchalantly. "But fisherman, if you drill a hole in the boat, water will rush in, the boat will sink, and we'll all drown," they said. As he continued drilling, the passengers began to cry and beg, "Fisherman, please stop, you must stop." "Nope, it's my boat, it's my drill, and I'm going to drill this hole." Someone remembered that the prince was on board. "Get the prince," he shouted. "Someone get the prince, he'll save us." The prince swaggered over. No lowly fisherman was going to ruin his afternoon. He stood over fishermen in his royal robes, and a hush came over the frightened crowd. "Fishermen, what are you doing?" he asked in his deep, most commanding voice. "I'm drilling a hole," responded fishermen, moving the drill around and around. "Why are you doing this?" asked the prince in his deep princely tone. "Because I feel like it," responded fishermen without even looking up at the prince. "Fishermen, if you make a hole in the boat will sink and we will all drown," the prince reasoned aloud. "Uh-huh," responded the fisherman. Small beads of sweat appeared on the brow of the prince, and his voice lost its commanding tone and took on that of a sincerely worried man. "Fisherman, I command you to stop." Fishermen ignored him and kept drilling. The prince was quickly losing his composure. Gone were the royal tone and all the royal trappings. Instead, he was just another frightened man. "But fisherman, what gives you the right to do this?" Fisherman explained slowly, "It's my boat, it's my drill, and I am going to make a hole. Now please move aside, you're blocking my light." And he continued to drill. The prince began crying and pleading like everyone else. "Please, fisherman, please," he begged. "I don't want to drown. I don't want to be eaten by fish. Please, fisherman, please." When the prince began to cry, fishermen at last stopped drilling. Yet again a hush came over the crowd. Fishermen looked up at the prince. "You don't want the boat to sink? You don't want to drown?" Fishermen echoed the prince's pleas. Then fishermen slowly repeated the terrible words that had ruined the kingdom. "Well, I'm sorry, but it's not my problem." The prince cried desperately, "What do you mean it's not your problem? Anyone can see that if I have a problem, you have a problem, and if you have a problem, I have a problem. If anyone has a problem, then everyone has a problem because we're all on the same boat." He stopped, like a man who had just figured out a great riddle. He repeated the words slowly. "If I have a problem, you have a problem, and if you have a problem, I have a problem. If anyone has a problem, then everyone has a problem, because we're all on the same boat. Anyone can see that." "Yes," said fishermen, "anyone can see that." "Yes," said everyone on the boat, "anyone can see that." Fishermen smiled. "Now we can all go home." He pulled the drill up out of the hull, turned the boat around, and sailed safely back to the harbor. The people who got off that boat were changed. Never, ever again would friend turn to friend, or neighbor turn to neighbor, or anyone turn to a stranger and say those terrible words. Instead, whenever a friend needed help from a friend, or a neighbor needed a hand from a neighbor, or a stranger needed some kindness, and whenever anyone came before the prince, he or she would hear, "Please, let me help you, because if you have a problem, I have a problem. And if I have a problem, you have a problem. If anyone has a problem, then everyone has a problem." You see, we're all in the same boat. And once again, the kingdom was paradise. On this Thanksgiving, we are reminded that in times that are particularly challenging, we are grateful not just for community and family and friends, but we are also grateful for the opportunity to help lift each other up, to help support each other, to help be there for each other, to help be there for those in need, for the poor, the widow, the stranger, the orphan in our midst, and for so many more. Yes, the world can seem overwhelming. There is so much that we cannot, as individuals, do about it. But before you become overwhelmed, before you feel like you are drowning, just remember, we are all in the same boat, and every little action we do, every kind word we say, every way we find to give is a chance to lift up others, is a chance to add a little more holiness to the world, is a chance and opportunity to make the world a little bit more as it ought to be. We are grateful for the opportunity not to give up hope, not to give up our resolve, and to remember that we are all in the same boat, even if not everyone can see it. And this is our chance to try and make the world, or our community, or our homes, or even just those whose lives we impact, a little bit more like paradise. For we are all in the same boat.